It's Tuesday night, it's 8 o'clock, and this is The Issue here on Cogeco TV. I'm Mark Carr, and I think we want to get started by giving you the numbers that you can call and text or tweet in to, because I think tonight there'll be a lot of that happening. It's hashtag The Issue on Twitter and The Issue on Facebook, and you can call 905-333-6088. And why is that? Not just because of my co-host, Brian Hegel. Welcome back, Brian. Nice to have you here. That's your camera. You called it.
That's my camera?
You called it
Okay.
right at the beginning of the show.
Thank you.
Nobody else is going to use that one. Welcome back.
I always feel welcome, Mark, especially with an introduction like that. I'm actually very excited about today's show because we have a very topical, relevant issue to Burlington. We're also the lead-in, apparently, for Donald Trump's speech to Congress. So we're a tough act to follow tonight, and I think you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But we'll don't go. It's after the show, so stay tuned here.
Okay. Now, you wanted a show about downtown. Why was that, Brian?
Well, downtown right now in Burlington and a lot of communities, especially in Halton, downtown is a very vibrant issue. It's at a critical point in our history where we're dealing with our sort of small town heritage and core, and how do we move forward into the modern world? It's everything from the low rises to the high rises to Central High. And I look at, there are issues out there.
You're bringing in Central High into the issue.
Well, it's downtown.
It's downtown.
And that's the whole issue about downtown. It reflects and represents a lot about what Burlington has been. The question is, what are we going to be in the future? And downtown is a platform for discussion, and it's right now on the tip of most people's tongues.
Okay, so I'll leave it up to you to introduce our guests for this evening.
Well, to my immediate right, your left, is Kelly Childs. Kelly Childs is probably very well known to a lot of us who are on social media, but she is the co-founder and owner of two businesses, really three, I think, when I include True Love. But Kelly's Bake Shop and Let Us Love Cafe. She's also a co-author with her daughter Erin of Made with Love, the cookbook. We do that around here as well. We do promote. And she's a proponent of healthy food, healthy living. And we're hopefully going to hear about how the health of downtown can be sustained and improved on in the future. But welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And that is a true family business. So that's Kelly. Next to Kelly is, and I have to have full disclosure, I've known our other guest since I was extremely small. It's Jeff Pakin of New Horizon. And New Horizon, he's the president of the development group. He is a local developer. So tonight we have an opportunity to hear from a local merchant. We're also going to hear from a local developer. Jeff brings a lot of experience in terms of leadership. He was past president of the Hamilton-Halton Home Builders Association, sat on the board with the Ontario Home Builders Association and the Canadian Home Builders Association. He is a native Burlingtonian. He still lives here. Kelly also lives here and works here and plays.
Okay, now let's get right down to it. And you wanted to ask the first question, so fire away, sir.
Thank you, Mark. My first question is for Kelly, but Kelly, I think you reflect a lot of what's going on in Burlington. We have people like Jeff and myself who grew up here. You didn't grow up here. You came from the Toronto area. Mm-hmm. What brought you to Burlington in the first place, and why did you decide to put down roots in business and in your life?
What brought me to Burlington was my daughter decided to go to McMaster University. So we had this very close relationship, and I was actually kind of really missed her. So I just went to Burlington, but it was kind of funny because I dropped her off at Mac, and we had a few tears, and then left Mac and went to Paradiso for lunch on Elizabeth Street. And I went, wow, this is like such a cool town. I've never been in downtown Burlington before, and that was in August of 2008. And I turned to my husband and I said, you know what? This is what I'm doing. We're going to be moving to Burlington, and kind of sold off everything, and that's what we did.
So what were the elements? What brought, when you saw Burlington, what was bringing you here and what's keeping you here?
So what brought me there, brought me here then was the feeling of, I felt like I was on vacation. It was really neat sitting out on a patio, had some beautiful buildings around, great, the village square was lovely looking, and we walked around the streets a bit, and it just felt like I was on vacation. It was a really a neat feeling. And so then what keeps me here then still is just that, I put down roots obviously with my 2 businesses, and have developed quite a following. So I still love the vibrancy of the city. It's and I guess really that's about it. Is just I love being able to walk to work. For me, I love that aspect of it, and I really enjoy where I am, and Brant Street's great, and I see a great future in downtown Burlington. I love the waterfront, love being on the water, and it just has a ton of things to offer.
Has tons of things, and I think a lot of folks would say those are positive, smaller town values that are there. There's a tight-knit community. Gentleman to your left is part of that group of developers, but he's not one of those big bad developers.
It's actually her right.
You're right.
Just saying.
My right. Just sitting over here. And the key issue, though, I think a lot of people have a view of developers, often like they have of lawyers like myself. We're often grouped. But Jeff, I've known you all my life, and you're likable, you're thoughtful, you're community-minded. You don't fit the mold. But in terms of development going on in Burlington, what are you hearing? What are you planning for?
Well, that's 2 different answers.
You can deal with one at a time.
Burlington, especially downtown, is growing up right now. If you turn the clock back to what I'll call the pre-Molinaro days, before they came downtown and really changed the face of what the streetscape looked like, what the living opportunities, such as you took advantage of, looked like in downtown Burlington. It was a place that was a destination for literally no one, and it's evolving, it's changing. There are some very incredible opportunities to live and work, some incredible opportunities to eat great food, and it's going to continue to change because that's how the world works. Specifically in Ontario, in southern Ontario, within an hour and a half of Toronto City Hall, there's approximately 100,000 new residents moving from outside of Canada to this area, the greater hour and a half circle around City Hall, on an annual basis. And there's pressures to put them into housing. This is, in my opinion, the most beautiful place in all of Canada to live, is the Burlington Waterfront. So there's going to be continuous pressure, and there's also going to be a strong desire for people to want to settle here. So.
Well, let me jump in here, because it seems to be a love fest at this point, and we've got that out of the way. So let's get to the hard questions. As a developer, and in particular downtown, you've dealt with city halls, not only Burlington City Hall, but a variety of them, and the Ontario Municipal Board. And that gets a shiver running up and down people's spines to hear about the Ontario Municipal Board. Right now, the issues are height and densities in downtown, which the mayor has rightly said is the responsibility of the Ontario government imposing those restrictions on Burlington. So with all of that, how have you found it is dealing with City Hall in regards to the OMB, in regards to negotiating with them to get things accomplished and done in Burlington?
It's a very good question. Let me preface the answer by saying I understand the various pressure points that are within the community. There are local residents, there are political pressures, there are pressures from developers, and it's not an easy game. But I'm a taxpayer in Burlington, have been for years and years, and I've always felt I get good value for my dollar as a taxpayer. As a professional doing business in town, the staff, the people that work in the city, by and large, are very committed to continuing the vision of the ever-changing world of Burlington. Politically, generally leveler heads prevail. The whole OMB issue really revolves around when local political decision making, and I am not suggesting anything on any particular aspect of any particular development, but when local decision making is just not the best planning, somebody else has to adjudicate and determine what the best planning is. And the developer's not always right. And the city's not always right. Generally, they can come together to a compromise that works for everybody to some degree.
As they've just done with the development, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiating, and they've come up with a solution on one of the downtown areas. If I could just ask Kelly, in your opinion, Kelly, did you know what you were moving into? In other words, the official plan, was it straightforward? Could you understand what was going to happen down around the bake shop?
No. So as far as I'm concerned, and from what I've been told, I've never been privy to the official plan, and I've been asked to attend numerous meetings and a lot of times to go to these kind of committee meetings, and there's been like one or two representatives of the downtown merchants of downtown Burlington, and we're talking about beautification and things that really affect the downtown core, I find greatly. And I don't understand, because I'm not a politician, I'm not from that world at all, that I don't understand why I'm like maybe one of two people showing up who actually care about how this downtown core is actually growing and evolving, right from the flower planters to the garbage cans to the benches to the sidewalks to the color of the sidewalks, and I see a lot of the area going into, for example, even disrepair, and I question it, and I go to the right authorities to find out, why these things aren't being kept up, and a lot of times it's their response is, well, we're waiting for the developers, like we know this block is sold or these particular storefronts are sold, we're waiting to amass all of them, then that developer comes in and builds it, and the sidewalks will get fixed then. But what bothers me as a merchant, and I really care deeply about the downtown core, I've invested heavily into it, is my businesses are there, and they're very reflective of a lot of the areas that are kind of not being tended to, because we're kind of at the developer's mercy. And that's what we're told, and again, it's only what I know. And as these storefronts and buildings are being bought up, then eventually a whole package gets put together, and then developers do their thing and potentially bid on it or whatever they do, and it puts me on shaky ground, because I am a tenant. I don't own my building, and for both buildings, and I'm not here to talk anything about my landlords. I love them greatly. One of them is the Molinaro Group, so the great guys. So
full disclosure.
Vince, Rob, and Sam are great guys. So and I'm very grateful for a lot of the opportunities that I've been given. So, but what just concerns me is that as a merchant myself now, if I want to get into the game, for Kelly's Bake Shop to say buy a location, which would be a great smart thing for me to do now as a businesswoman, I really don't have that opportunity now, because I'm kind of going for all these storefronts and buildings that you guys are going for too, right? And I can't compete in that world.
And the Kelly's Bake Shop is a one-story.
Well, it's two-story. I do have my office on the second floor.
Two-story?
Yep.
Okay, so
it's
two-story. It's
yes.
doubled what I had thought it was.
Yes.
And that eventually something is going to go in that place that's much larger than 2 stories.
Yes.
How do you think that's going to affect downtown?
Well, I'm all for, I love having these open discussions, because I think that's how we end up, coming to this, you're not necessarily the one that's right, I'm not necessarily the one that's right, the city's not necessarily the one that's right, but I think that collectively we can all come to this really beautiful way of compromising and building something that is really fantastic.
But shouldn't it be predictable? So when you're moving downtown, you know that this section is going to eventually be 20 stories,
yes.
and so on. And that's what an official plan is supposed to do.
I get exactly what you're saying, and yes, I totally agree with you. So, right now we're talking about the block that's north of me, and I know that's hitting the fan right now, and I think that's 26 stories, if I'm not mistaken. the block that's north of me.
Proposed. Yes.
And it's getting people up in arms about it, and it's provoking a lot of conversation about it. But you're absolutely right that there should be a plan almost, like for the downtown core, and so you would know what is the height restrictions, what are you really looking for this. Are the first, 4 or 5 stories of a high rise, if you can do 20 stories, then make them all have massive terraces. So those people that live on the first 5 stories are still part of the downtown core. I think that what I find, because I am from the condo world, I've lived in the Baxter and Buttons Wharf, is the higher you go up, the less connected you are to the earth, and the less connected you are to the pedestrians walking by, and there's this sort of detachment. There's almost a separate world when you're on the top floors. And I think that if you end up having more of that open concept, and you can wave at Johnny walking by and see what people are doing, you see the festivals, you see people shopping, and you create more of a vibrancy than being closed off behind these high glass towers, and I think that we end up having a disconnect. So, but to speak of your plan of the downtown core, yes, and there's, for example, a bicycle path that's going to be going through right from east of me through the Martini House.
And secondary plan, and that's been there
and that was a shock, though, to us when we're going, okay, but how much parking are we losing? Because, as merchants, man, we're like all about the parking. We are so short of parking, and that's one of the #1 complaints that I have from my customers coming in, daily to the bake shop, and to Let Us Love Cafe as well, is there's a massive parking situation problem that is in the downtown core, because there's not a lot of visitor parking for people visiting the condos even. So where do those people go?
And on that note, we're going to take a short break. Brian, you were right. There's a lot of content here that we've got to get to.
Right, and this is all about trying to find balance and the appropriateness, whether it's, how big or what's the height, what's the scale, how do you preserve community? And the downtown usually is about that.
Or how do you create a new community?
But when we come back, I also want to find out, because I'm here, there's always risk in business and where you live, but it feels like you have the sense of powerlessness of we're at the risk of the developers, and maybe our city hall doesn't have a strong vision, doesn't have the strong leadership to find compromise, and perhaps it's a sense of almost being rolled over in terms of where we're going. So it's a sense of helplessness. Maybe there's a lack of engagement right now, so there's a lot to talk about, but there's a lot to be done too.
Okay, and Brian, you objected to the 25-year strategic plan that the mayor had put forward and city approved, because it was 25 years. So maybe we'll get into that when we come back. I want to remind our audience, hashtag The Issue if you have any comments or questions, or you can go to Facebook, The Issue, or give us a call, 905-333-6088. We'll put you right on the air. I'm Mark Carr for The Issue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with my co-host Brian Hegel. And Brian, I was talking just about the 25-year strategic plan that the city has, and you were a big objector to that being 25 years. And I'm just wondering how you can have a 25-year strategic plan, live up to that strategic plan, provide people with knowledge about what downtown in this particular case is going to look like. How can all that happen?
Well, first of all, you need a plan. So you need to have targets that you can hit. And I think the problem that I had was the 25-year period. It's good, you'll see a vision, you got a sense of it, but you have to have signposts. You've got to pause and say, are we getting there? You have to be nimble and adjust, because times change. Burlington of 10 years ago or 25 years ago is a very different place than what it is today. So I think the objection that I brought up was more about the time frame. Businesses tend to work on 3 to 5, maybe 7-year strategic plans. So the city, trying to collectively get a strong vision, has probably watered down that vision by trying to reach at very general targets. Specific milestones, measurable milestones are key. I look at its strategic planning side. That's where you talk about it. There's also the official plan, and they need to dovetail together. And our official plan, unfortunately, in Burlington, a lot of people refer to it as the official suggestion. When they look at it in terms of heights and things like that, they say, well, we're not following it. Well, that's probably because it was, in history it made sense, but not today. So that's where you go to compromise. So from a developer's standpoint, Jeff, What do you see in that planning process?
So in a previous iteration of city planning, the issue of height and density was used as a control mechanism as opposed to as a planning document that could be relied on. And there's a very simple example on Plains Road. In 1999, Plains Road, through the whole public process, determined 6-story height is the maximum, and we're never going higher than 6 stories, and you can go up and down this specific redevelopment opportunity, and people have come back and asked for 7, and the answer is no, 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 no. A long-range vision for a street to have a community feel, some of the issues you were referring to where people are near the street, it's doable in that place, and they did it in that place, and Councillor Craven has done a very good job in both communicating that and then sticking to the plan. I can tell you from 8 years ago, there were 3 of us each building one condominium building in all of Burlington, or trying to at that time. And you fast forward, it's only 8 years, there's stuff coming out of the walls every day about new this, new that, higher, so you have to look at the changing times in the market. You know, next week it could be a lousy market and interest rates could be 9%, and this conversation's over for a few years. Right. So at this point in time, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of demand, and there's a lot of pressure to get decisions made. And I'll give you a very simple example. Would you rather have wide, full lot covered buildings, or narrow space between the buildings, skinny tall buildings? Right. There's no right answer, but somebody has to vision that down the road and say, okay, up Brant Street, we'd like to have X amount of meters between each building, so there's view-throughs and sun comes through and all of that. Once you're past the 12th story and you're off the street, does it matter if it's 18 or 25? I'm not answering, but these are the questions that have to be asked. And is it better to have more room and more ground orientation at the street level with a narrower tower going up the middle that goes higher versus something that is capped at 12 stories and fills the whole, and it's just a wall of 12-story buildings?
But I get concerned. I mean, I think all you're talking about here, I mean, Burlington's blessing and curse is that we're a great place to live in. But do we have that plan? Do we have that vision? In other words, if you start looking at where downtown is now, and Kelly, I like your view of it because you're on the ground there, we have now what seems to be a connect-the-dots system where we have a tall building going over here, another one going over here. We have buildings in between which probably have no significant heritage quality to them to preserve. And who's really running the show? In other words, whose vision are we following, and what are your main concerns in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, let me throw in here.
You're not Kelly.
You're right. I just can't be quiet for that long a time, Brian.
Of course not.
A lot of the pressure comes from the province, who dictates to the city what type of height, and well, they don't dictate the height, but they tell them how they want the new people in town where they want them to go, and places to grow.
They dictate density, and they also, part of the 25-year plan is that today in 2000, or yesterday in 2016, you had to have a 2041 plan. That's not the city, that's the province saying everybody has to take their share of the people. We know between now and then the population in Burlington is going to go from X to X. Where are you going to put them, how are you going to put them there, and under these intensification targets, you must operate. It's a long range, you know, we hear a lot of talk about why don't people live like they live in Europe? Why don't families want to live in a 3-bedroom condo downtown as opposed to a 3-bedroom house in Southeast or Northeast or Aldershot or something else? I mean, I think a lot of people move from Europe to here to live the way Canadians live. And now there's a great aging population in Canada that has some infill from younger families coming here, and there's sort of demand at every place in the market. Hence the condo boom in Burlington. And the fact that we're built to the boundary, it's because there's just demand of every type in a community that's this desirable.
Well, we're only built to the boundary that was arbitrarily decided by council. So in other words, and I don't agree with this idea, if we were to expand beyond the 407 going north, that would reduce the pressure for intensification around Burlington in downtown.
So it wouldn't. What it would do is it would grow the city faster.
Okay.
Because the people that would move to Oakville would have an alternative to be in Burlington if they wanted a house. But there's a strong desire for people to live in a condominium environment right now because of ease and flexibility and lock-and-go lifestyle.
And let me be very clear. I agree 100% with that limitation of the 407 as the northern urban boundary of Burlington.
Although you might ask, why on the north side of a 400 series highway isn't there some strip of employment land that is very easily accessible, the goods can move, and there's a,
but on
there's a road there.
On the east side,
Industrial.
there was.
Industrial, yeah.
There was on the east side.
So what
And that before last election was changed to residential.
Because of the pressure of demand and the oversupply of industrial that exists already
so it's
in
not
the
that
boundary.
they didn't plan for that, it's just that it flipped.
So
in the
our
interim.
focus is getting a bit sprawled, which is very natural.
Very
We're
good.
going from talking about build out to build up. But Kelly, I mean, you're trying to get in there because I think it's important. There's the viewpoint. Everybody has a perspective, whether you're sitting in Queen's Park or you're sitting on City Council. And quite frankly, my view is sometimes you just don't let things happen. You have to have a backbone if you're at the city level or the regional level, and there's a regional chair that from time to time will pipe up and say, you're imposing these things on us from the province, we're going to make some demands back to you so that we can build capacity in the proper way.
And just on that point, to be full disclosure, see, you mentioned the regional chair. He is my brother, so just to get that out, and go ahead.
But I want to hear from Kelly on this, please.
I think the three of you
not
talk a
about
lot.
Gary being my brother.
So I believe that the downtown core is suffering in the retail small business sector right now, and there's a reason why AAA tenants aren't coming to the downtown core. We lost the opportunity of getting Lululemon. They went to Mapleview Mall instead. And because they clearly don't see the vision, and I think that we're going to suffer a lot of bumps along the road there. Even Kelly's Bake Shop, we are thinking about possibly moving because we really don't have our roots firm enough where I want to be to take it to the next level, because we're at that level now. So I have these decisions to make, but I see a lot of for lease signs, and I see businesses sort of, struggling in a way, and I believe that it is that vision that is so necessary in the downtown core. So, like what you were saying, having a tall building over here and a tall building over there, and what's happening from point A to point B, and what happens in between is. Yeah, like we don't have the strong retail that's available to ourselves, and on many levels, I think that is something that has to be definitely considered.
Is there sufficient space in the official plan for retail in the downtown? Because I don't think that there is.
I don't think that there is either. And even when a condo does get built, then we're making room for on the ground level. There's going to be a lobby, then there's a ramp for the underground parking to get in and out. But then you're losing, I think, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of retail space potentially. But I just don't feel that. I think that a lot of things are being neglected in the downtown core, and it's from like the sidewalks being kept up, and it's from the benches and the trees are like I contact the city a lot with trees that are dying and they're not being cared for, and it's like people are just forgetting about the beautification of the town. To have it like a Niagara on the Lake, or even what downtown Markham has done now. Markham right, Markham Road and Highway 7, what they've done for the new design that they've done is a fantastic job. And I think that's what we're missing, is like that beautiful beautification plan of where it's going to go. And then, this condo fits in here and this condo fits in there. But, we know that is what will eventually get built. There's not a surprise all of a sudden where there's a 26-story and a 32-story, and then before you know it, we're going higher up. Do we consider the wind too?
But if you ask Mayor Goldring about the vision, he would say, I'm sure, and I'm sure he'll tweet in or call in if this isn't correct, that there is a vision for downtown. It may not be exactly your vision, but there is a vision, I think he would say.
But Mark, what I'm hearing is there's struggling going on. In other words, how do you build this for the future? And are we a concrete jungle, or are we going to include some green space in there as well? Where's the balance coming from? I think the problem right now, I'm a little concerned too, when we're not getting the people who matter most engaged, because they may feel there isn't something I can do about it, so they move on. Other people move in. My struggle here is a little bit of, okay, City Hall may have a vision, but they're not communicating it to someone that sits here, 2 businesses downtown, is part of what hopefully will be Burlington's future. Now, the developers are maybe taking advantage of that, in other words, of seeing opportunity, but they also have to make sure, what is Burlington's downtown? Are we going to have retail? Are we going to have paid parking? Are we going to have free parking? Are we going to take care of the little things that you're talking about, which should matter to a community? Or are we just going to blindly say, look, let's just build some stuff here. We'll bring people in, we'll satisfy the provincial needs, and we will get a bigger tax base.
But the downtown area does pay an improvement tax, which is supposed to be allocated to those types of things that you're talking about.
I think part of what Kelly's frustration is that the city, and I'm projecting this, doesn't want to pay twice. So yes, there's a fund, and yes, they could beautify this sidewalk, and they expect in 3 years that it's going to be torn up and there will be hoarding and there'll be a new building. So why do it now if it's just going to be undone? That's not fair, and that's also not the developers. Right. I mean, that's not our property. That's city property, and when I say our, I mean the Royal R. We're paying our taxes. You are paying indirectly or directly taxes for what's in front of your building, and it should be treated the same way as any other finished building down the street's front sidewalk is treated, until such a time as it gets torn up, and then we do pay to replace it. So.
And on that note, we're going to take another break. I know these breaks are intrusive to the debate, but it gives me a chance to have a drink of water. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with co-host Brian Hegel, and we want to remind you, if you want to join the conversation, you can go to Twitter at #TheIssue, Facebook, The Issue, and tell us how you feel about development, particularly in downtown, or give us a shout at 905-333-6088. You don't have to go on the air. You can leave a message with a control room, and they'll get that message to us, and we can talk about it. Brian?
Well, up to now, we've focused a lot around intensification. We haven't even talked about congestion, traffic yet, really. Or parking. We touched on that briefly. But there's another I word other than intensification, which I think is very important, and that's infrastructure. So we've already heard, and I think everyone gets a sense who's in the Burlington community, things move pretty fast here. And I believe
I think a developer would say they move very slowly.
Well, they don't move fast enough because there's business opportunity, right? And the window opens, it can close just as quick. And I think that's part of the struggle going on here, is nobody can predict the future. But from the past, we're built in Burlington, I think, on a platform of maybe 100,000 people. That was the idea with our roads and our systems. But today we're at about 185,000, and we're probably growing a little bit further. We're aging, so we need to move people around properly and accommodate that. Affordability has become another issue. So the question always comes down to, have we got things a little backwards? I mean, the train's moving, so we have to deal with what we have. But what's the problem in terms of, or is there a problem? Do we have enough infrastructure for the changes that are already happening in downtown? Have we built our transit and our transportation around this region and this community? Is it good enough, sufficient enough for what's lying ahead in the very near future? So I'll turn that over to Jeff first.
Well, I want to pick up on something Kelly said earlier, which is that she can walk to work. And if ever there was a place in Burlington where that should be a strong and repeatable possibility, it would be in the downtown core. Somehow business in volume is not being attracted there, and I don't mean retail business, I mean office use business.
Office would be important.
Office would be great. People in offices living within the core in terms of ease of transportation to get to and from. Those opportunities would certainly help, and then the more people living there, working there, the more clients there are for the retail, which is always.
But doesn't that fly in the face of reality? In other words, with the chamber has noted that business hasn't grown in Burlington in over 2 decades. In other words, we still have the same number of businesses. We don't have huge employers coming in here. We're trying harder now. But the reality is we're still a bedroom community. In other words, people ideally would love to work and live here, but most don't.
They commute.
And they commute. So there's the congestion. It's the infrastructure.
Or
they go south. They go elsewhere. And and that's probably another issue for another show about the boundaries and where people are in or out of the GTA now. But in terms of the infrastructure, I mean, isn't that saying something if we're saying, well, we'd like to have the nice European feel of walking to our markets and to our work? But that really isn't here in Burlington. So are we really just creating a lot of condominiums and a problem with parking because everybody's driving cars?
So can I pick on you?
No, you cannot.
So you have
Yes,
the largest.
I think I'm the co-host.
Thank you. You have the largest law firm in Halton?
Yes, we're with another one that we don't talk about.
Neck and
We're
neck?
about neck and
Okay.
neck. Thank you.
And your location is not in a downtown office tower like law firms are, and I'm not picking on you.
No.
In many other major centers.
Yes, we're smarter. We're centrally located.
Well,
but yes, go ahead.
You are just off the highway where all of the office business seems
Yes.
to be in Burlington. And
Correct.
that's a challenge that could have been overcome ages ago with some repositioning,
Modifications to the official
modifications,
plan.
and that's not today's problem.
That's hindsight.
That's 30 years ago's problem. So what can you do to attract the businesses like yours that are traditional, white collar, lots of working people, lots of action on the streets, business towers, for lack of a better term, or business opportunities in the core that would create a good balance between residents in the evening needing parking and traffic, businesses during the day with parking and traffic, and people actually being able to live and work there because in the environment of again, I'm just picking on you, but a law firm, you've got a number of opportunities for live within 3 minutes of Brant Street and you can get to work and on your feet.
Sure. But there are obstacles there. In other words, for professional services, government even, there isn't enough right now. They're having issues at City Hall, trying to figure out where they put
Where to put the people.
Should they be moving centrally? In other words, is the downtown need to reshape itself again in terms of what it does? Parking is a big one.
Parking is a massive problem.
It's a massive problem, and it's one of those things where we talk about having a walkable, livable city, but the reality is most people still use cars, and when we build these condos, all we're doing is we're encouraging more cars.
Because
It's a big
they
place
haven't
now.
invested in the infrastructure
There's my point.
of a proper transit system.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem now. So to go to Jeff's point about, in hindsight, you see where all the problems were that we've inherited today. Do we have the kind of leadership and the commitment to try to anticipate what we're dealing with, not 25 years from now, 10 years from now? Do we, when we suddenly realize, with the OMB's blessing perhaps, unless it gets changed or morphed, we're going to suddenly have these very, almost like Death Star type high-rises? Are we going to change what Burlington will become?
I might not call them Death Star.
I didn't think you would, and I'm not picking on you.
So
No,
what
I
is
understand.
what is the plan then when you end up having? So that here we're looking at the city right now.
Excuse me for just a minute. If you look at that, talk about underutilized space.
Right.
I mean, everywhere that previous shot showed is underutilized space.
And that's been for lease now for about a year.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's the competition. How dare they show that when you're sitting here?
And there's a downtown, you see glimpses of what it used to be, and you definitely see where it's going.
So that downtown was designed for how people lived 50 years ago.
Right.
And the downtown of today would look a whole lot more like what you're seeing here, which is not necessarily there, but some sort of residential above ground opportunity
Right.
with some sort of retail, commercial services opportunities at street level. And hopefully, you know, I love the thought of closing Brant Street from Lakeshore to Caroline on weekends for pedestrians. I'll make a piazza in downtown Burlington every weekend in the summer. Finally, we saw something.
But you're right. I think that's the goal, and that's the kind of creativity. But also, somebody's got to initiate that to get it to happen, and not just talk about it, not put it in a plan, and hope we get there in 25 years.
Well, this is where I get confused, because there is talk right now about designing of the future of Burlington, and I was part of this. So, you know, they're discussing it, but you know, someone like yourself is not part of that, and you've got a lot of experience with, you know, creation and design and stuff, and that would be something that I would think that you would want to be a part of, and other developers, because you're investing millions of dollars into the downtown core to beautify it in your way.
Right.
But it needs to be part of the whole cohesive plan, and you know, you would be aware that there's a massive parking shortage in the downtown core. That the merchants, I mean, we're the small businesses. We're like kind of the economic engine of Canada, and we're really suffering in the downtown core, because I think that if there is a lack of vision, there might be a lack of vision, but if there is vision, we don't know about it. And we're blindsided by a lot of things that are happening along the way. And like I said, my goal is to put down roots in this city, and I'm having a very difficult time being able to see that for myself.
Should not the BIA, should that not be their responsibility to look at the official plan and break it down and present that to the
merchants and
merchants?
stuff. And again, you were saying that, you know, that the retail is sort of stayed at a level, it's not growing at all. So, you know, why is that? Why is downtown Burlington not attractive to people to come into the downtown core and
I think
create business?
I have to compliment you. It's not that it's not attractive. It's that only the best of the retailers can find success there, because you're a destination. The people aren't there already.
Oh, it's a total destination.
You have to draw them.
We have people from Toronto, from Ottawa, London, Kitchener, Waterloo, and I think I told you earlier there's about 25,000 people a week that come through Kelly's Bake Shop doors. It's a significant amount of customers and guests.
Have to widen those doors a little bit.
We have to widen those doors a bit. We need a few more parking spots.
Especially the outdoor.
But there you'd have to apply for a permit to do it, and that may take too long. Who knows? Who knows? With that, not knowing about what is going to happen in downtown Burlington from your perspective, and somewhat from a developer's perspective, isn't it the job of our municipal government to be able to at least communicate, even if it isn't what you want to hear, at least communicating that to you? And again, I go back to, if I asked Mayor Rick Goldring if this had been communicated, he would probably say yes, time and time and time again. But if he's doing that as our municipal government, and Kelly's Bakery isn't hearing what he's got to say, don't they have to look at how they communicate these things with the developers and with the retailers downtown?
I think that would be a fair assumption. And I think, in all fairness, as much as you want to grow, obviously, and you have plans to, I don't know if you have more developments on the go or not, but for the Bridgewater, it's going down. You're doing the hotel and everything too, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. But I think that you have a conscience, and you want to know how it fits into the whole downtown core, and you probably want to know too your impact into the downtown core. And so you've got the little business owners going, oh my gosh, there's all these new residents coming in, and they're all going to need visitor parking too, and we're already suffering from 360 on Pearl and Baxter and Bunton's Wharf and all these other condos, and oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Because there is no visitor parking for those buildings.
But there is for us.
And so, we get these people parking in the downtown core, which really we need them so badly for retail and stopping at our restaurants and shopping for clothes at Joel's and stuff too. Like we definitely are suffering on many levels.
And you're right about that. And the part of the issue is this is like turning a huge steamship, not a little
and
canoe.
It doesn't turn on a dime.
It can't turn on a dime, and the market. I use the example of 10 years ago to today, but from 5 years ago to today, it's hugely different. Like what people are looking for from us,
it's very different.
And the city itself, when your building where you live was being built, the city was desperate to have somebody please come to downtown Burlington and build something where people will live. We'll even allow you to not have to put in visitor parking because at the time it was a non-issue. Now there's 3 or 4 of them,
right.
and I can tell you a parking spot costs over $40,000 to create underground. It's not an easy decision to say, oh, we're going to put 10 more visitor parking spots. That's
a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cupcakes.
Jeff, we're going to take a break again right now, and then come back for our final segment. So get those questions, those last couple of questions ready, Brian, and we'll be right back here on The Issue. I'm Mark Carr. Welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with co-host Brian Hegel. And Brian, just in about 5 minutes that we've got left, you wanted to address an issue.
30-second question.
Not the issue.
Not the issue, not the show. During the break, we were talking about something we haven't actually touched on in this conversation on air, is what I consider to be the jewel of downtown. We've talked about streetscape. We haven't talked about the waterfront. And the waterfront is obviously and should be a main attraction for businesses and people and tourists, et cetera, and has been. Question I have, though, came up in our discussion. There's a how many $1 million plan?
$52 million plan, combined region and city.
City and the region.
For Spencer Smith Park.
And to do what with it for 52 million?
There's, if my memory's right, there's 7 different sort of themed sections, elements for various age groups to be attracted to. There'd be a little beach and some kids play areas, some seniors reading reflective areas, some interactive, like a really very wisely thought out plan.
And that's encouraging. But the discouraging part for me was there's a disconnect here. Is one of the business leaders in downtown, 2 businesses committed to trying to make it work, and despite some of the challenges and taking advantage of the benefits, you did not know about this plan. So there's an issue right there.
Your councillor puts out a newsletter almost weekly. So
it's too long, you can't read it all.
Why isn't it in there?
Well, everyone who's watching this show now knows about it.
It's in there.
Which is a good thing. I'm sorry for not knowing about that.
But it's important.
I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, it's important. I think so. In our final couple of minutes here, I just wanted to ask Jeff, because you've got a development down by the waterfront.
Just a small one.
It's a relatively small one.
It's actually on the waterfront.
It's on the waterfront.
Sorry, on the waterfront.
I think
trademark.
we do have a picture of it here.
that.
If Joey can put that up. Go ahead and we'll.
But in any
put it
event,
up.
you have taken over a project which was stalled for virtually decades, and there you go. They're right by the waterfront. From your standpoint, this is obviously a part of the new plan for the waterfront. What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years around the waterfront beyond the $52 million investment over time? Where do you see it going as a developer?
So the beauty of this particular design is that it's very people-oriented and it's connecting to the existing path along the waterfront that allows, there's a ground floor restaurant with an outdoor patio, some of the sort of better features that were described earlier about living in downtown Burlington. I think with the enhancement of the park and with it's just a more livable place. I think you'll just find more and more people. The challenge is, how do you get people who are under 50 to be able to afford to live downtown?
Right.
And that's going to take some different sort of planning and different price pointing in order to regenerate what's downtown and not just make it an old people bedroom community for people
That is
like
the hard
me.
part, right?
It
Because
is a
it
challenge.
attracts the older
Yeah,
people,
for sure.
and then we lose them in the wintertime.
Right. And the younger people, this is a very massive generalization, but they're mostly near the transit, so they're up near the highways, they're up north of the highway, they're at
these
Molinero's Paradigm Hub building, which is fantastic, and you know, you walk across the street, you get in the GO train, you leave town. That's great. Wouldn't it be better if you walked across the street, grabbed a Kelly's cupcake, and then walked to your office and went to work? And that could happen, maybe not right across the street from the water, but 4 blocks up. That a more affordable option for the living opportunity for younger people could happen in the core.
And you know, we could talk about this for an awfully long time.
We could.
But
Yes,
I
yes.
do want to tell our audience that we are trying to get the city manager and the director of planning on the show, hopefully for March 21st, but that remains up in the air. I appreciate both of you coming on tonight, telling us your perspective on downtown. Brian, it was a good show. I enjoyed.
They're
it.
all good shows.
I
This was
enjoyed it.
particularly
It was
good.
too short, though. Very short.
That's always the case. But it was an interesting show, and I hope it's given our audience something to think about, and they can talk more intelligently about downtown. And if you guys have got any questions for the city manager or director of planning, fire them to us, and we'll ask them when they come on. I want to thank Brian as well for being on the show as co-host. It's always great to have you here, Brian. You bring an added dimension to it.
That's one way of saying it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I also want to thank Ferreira, Daniel, Andrew, Hillary, Vicky for their volunteerism behind the cameras and in the control room, and particularly to Autumn, who's on her last week now and heading back to Mohawk College, and also to our producer Joey, who works overtime with us, grabbing those pictures of downtown. And so, thank you once again for joining us, and thank you for joining us here on The Issue. I'm Mark Carr on TV Cogeco, truly local television. Good night.